this book, I decided we have had college co-eds disappear in Florida since Tiffany's disappearance, about every 4 years. And they fit a profile. They fit a profile. They're between 19 and 22, 23, pretty, athletic, and they've gone out from their dorms, gone out to do something, and then they're gone. And the most recent happened last year, a young woman who lived in Tampa. And I started looking at these cases, and I said, I talked to my friend Andy, and I said, it seems to me somebody's profiling them. They all seem to fit a profile. And he said, well, you might be right. And he said, what do you know about abductors who profile, based upon all the books I've given you and all of our discussions over the last 5 years? And I said, well, I know that abductors who profile generally keep their victims, unless the victims fight them terribly. They keep them. And so that's the book I wrote. I wrote this novel about these men who abduct, who profile young women for a particular reason. And it takes place here in Florida. And it's based on a lot of real stuff. But it's very much a novel, because I don't want to hurt victims' families when you write these things. The book came out September 15th. About a week and a half before that, I get a call from a reporter over the St. Pete Times, book reviewer, and a terrific lady named Colette Bancroft. And she said, I just finished The Night Monster, and she said, do you know how many parallels there are to the J.C. Dugard case in this book? And I said, no. How many? She said, I've counted 10. And every day something's breaking. You know, the J.C. Dugard case is 18 years old. The case in your book is 18 years old. You know, he was profiling. They're profiling. And on and on and on and on and all this terrible stuff. And I said, well, I don't have a crystal ball. I do not. What I do is I look at patterns. And the patterns tend to be the same for these people who do this. And one of the things that I talk about in The Night Monster is that people who do these kind of crimes do not live in a vacuum. They don't live in a vacuum. They buy groceries, they buy clothes, some of them work, have jobs, they go to church, and people in the community know something's not right, but they choose not to act. Garrido was a great example, because his neighbors knew who he was and what he had done, knew he was on parole, and they knew that there were girls back there that shouldn't be back there. I saw an aerial photograph of his home. I present a similar sort of scenario here, only it's a whole town in Florida that is in on it. And how many of you live here in Florida? Okay, you'll enjoy this. The town is based upon a real town. I call it Chatham. It's based upon a real town called Vernon, Florida. For those of you who've lived here for a while, you know what Vernon was about. And I have had people who don't live in Florida email me and say, that is the most preposterous thing, what you say these people in this town are doing. And I said, let me send you the article about the town. And I've sent it to several people from out of state. And one of them called me on the phone screaming. He said, you didn't make this up. And I said, no, 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 this happens down here. We have an unusual crime. We have an unusual undercurrent. And I don't want to ruin the story for you, but it's just, you know, this town was so bad that they actually passed this, I don't want to say a law, but they decided to run a highway through it to destroy it. Let's just take it off the map. And that's what they're going to do. They're going to run a highway through it because of something that happened there in the 1960s. And I present this scenario in the book, and I've had many law enforcement people talk to me about it, that these people don't work in a vacuum, but in fact, people who serial abduct and serial kill and commit serial crimes, predators, that they surround themselves by people who are willing to look the other way. You know, the question always is, when people disappear, the assumption is, you know, we're never going to find them. And more we are finding them. And there's an expression in this business which is that until you find the body, the person's alive. And one of the things I said in the early books about writing crime, I find writing crime to be depressing. It can really get you down. Most cops can, it's why they retire after 20 years. I know some people think the cops don't work long enough. Trust me, 20 years is a lifetime. You don't want to work longer than that as a cop. But this particular work, you talk to people who do this kind of work, and they talk in colors. And it's very strange that they will tell you that most of them have worked homicides. And homicides are always black. That's the color. Okay, you can catch the guy or the woman who did it, and you can bring them to justice, whatever your definition of that is. It doesn't bring the person back, and it doesn't make the family feel that much better. It brings closure, as sophomoric as that word can be, or misused as that word can be. This field is different. There's always light. It's light, because there's this potential that the person is still alive. J.C. Dugard, Elizabeth Smart, I believe the young boy's name Sean Shirkauer. They're alive. And I'll just say this, is that these people, these J.C. and Elizabeth Smart, we really need as a society to study, because they have figured out how to deal with monsters. We have not as a society. We have no clue how to deal with these people. We don't understand them. It's coming out now that we really don't understand their motivations. And yet these people, as young people, have figured out ways to deal with them and to survive. Said in a book he wrote that he believed that the motivations for people doing these crimes, and serial abduction is very similar to serial killing. There's a lot of parallels to it. He believed the motivation were normal things that we would understand. Desire for company, desire for affection, desire for companionship. And a lot of people, when they read this, thought Ressler was out of his mind. They thought that these people are like Hannibal Lecter. You know, he's killing people to eat them. Well, there was a man in Kansas City named Rader, who was the BTK killer. Rader went into people's homes, tied them up, and killed them in broad daylight. He usually did around noon. And Kansas City is a place this stuff doesn't happen. And Rader also taunted the police. And from 1988 to 2004, he was silent. Silent. They didn't know what happened. 2004, he contacted the police again, started sending them letters, saying, "I'm going to start doing this again." And thank God, they caught him. And Rader, besides keeping extensive diaries, has been willing to talk to the FBI. And he said something that was extraordinary, which proved that Ressler was right years ago. They said to him, "What did you do for that 16-year period? I mean, you didn't kill anybody, did you?" "No." He said, "I replaced those cravings with family activities." He I think, became a deacon at the church. He was with his son's Boy Scout troop. I believe he was troop leader. He worked criminal investigations. He did stuff with his family, normal things. And he discovered that those things replaced those cravings to kill. And then what happened in 2004? His kids left home. How many of you experienced that? Kids go away to school, empty nest, and the cravings returned. It was basically loneliness. I will say this, these books have happy endings. Sometimes a little bittersweet, but they do have happy endings, and that's very, very important to me. And I think it's because people can survive these, they do survive them, and I like books that have light in them. I actually wanted my publisher with this cover that it have light. Very important to me that it have light. She knew what the story was, she knew how the story ended, and I said, even though it's about a monster, that there are ways of dealing with them. And we're finally coming to sort of that realization that there are ways to deal with these folks.